Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar Powering Humanitarian Facilities Dialogue on Implementation Model. My name is Ranisha Basnet, and today I'll be moderating this webinar along with my colleague Lisa Feldman from Energypedia. As you know, this webinar is organized by three organizations: UNITA, Energypedia, and ICRC. And this webinar is part of a webinar series, Sustainable Energy in Humanitarian Settings. Therefore, I do encourage you to have a look at our past webinar where we talked about different issues within the humanitarian energy nexus, such as who are the actors in the humanitarian energy nexus, what are the key studies for providing essential humanitarian services, and so on. So we will provide you a link to all these past webinars in a follow-up email. So I do encourage you to download the presentations and have a look at our past webinar videos. And also stay tuned for our webinar in February, where we will talk about energy efficiency and designing for sustainability. And now a small tip for all our audience who are listening to us. On the right side of your screen, you see a chat box. If you don't see a chat box, you see like an orange icon. When you click on this icon, a chat box will expand. And there you can have the option called chat or questions. So please use this option to send in your questions during the webinar. And what we will do is we'll collect all these questions, and towards the end where we have our Q&A session, we will address them to the respective speakers. So it would be great if you could tell us to whom the question is addressed to, such as speaker 1, presentation 1, or so on. So that will help us to address the question to the respective speaker. So let's kickstart the webinar by knowing a little bit about you. So on your screen now, you should have a poll popping up. So yes, now you have the poll question on your screen, and please use the poll and tell us where you are tuning in today from, whether you are tuning in from Asia, Africa, Europe, or Latin America. So the questions are coming in. So I'm going to leave the poll for a few more seconds. And another few more seconds as as our audience are typing in their answers. And now I'll close the poll and display the results. So we have today a lot of people tuning in from Europe, followed by Africa and Asia. So welcome to all of you one more time. And now you have a second poll question popping up on your screen. So please tell us, in which sector do you work? So we are asking this question because we want to know you better, and so that our future webinars are more designed to your need and interest. So please tell us if you are working for an energy organization or a humanitarian organization or energy company, research institute, or others. So I'll leave the poll for a few more seconds as the answers are coming in. And now I'll close it and display the answers. So we have a lot of people joining in from energy-related organizations, followed by humanitarian and research, and then energy companies. So thank you to all of you, and let's go back to the presentation. So now I wanted to give you a quick run through the agenda for today. Today we have 5 presentations. The first one is from Cube Energy, which will provide you an overview of implementation models. Then we have 2 case studies, one from IOM South Sudan and another from ICRC Pakistan. Then we have a short presentation from UNDP Copenhagen, followed by Global Plan of Action. So without further ado, I want to welcome my first speaker for today, Mats Julin Hansen. Mats is the CEO of Cube Energy, and he has many years of experience working in the humanitarian organizations, Today, Mads is going to talk about the different implementation models for implementing solar energy. Mads, the floor is yours, so we can quickly unmute you.
Thank you, Ranisha. So when we're talking about the different models that humanitarians can use for procuring renewable energy, what we'll focus on in this presentation is how this relates to more traditional purchase models, as well as financed options, and compare the pros and the cons of each model with a particular focus on the technical and financial implications that this has for the organization. So the presentation is based on a solar handbook that we published with the Moving Energy Initiative last year. And this is a handbook that has more details than what will be provided in this presentation, and you can find that on our website. In the presentation, I thought I would start to say 2 words about how this works relates to Cube Energy and the experience that we've had with the establishing the company. So if you can go to the next slide. So we started working on Cube in 2016 and our basic goal when we started was to make it easier for humanitarian organizations to benefit from renewables by trying to remove some of the technical and financial constraints that was limiting the sector from transitioning away from diesel. So we were a small group of people that had our backgrounds from the humanitarian sector and had seen a lot of solar systems that had been stranded and stopped working for unknown reasons. And we had seen how the limited investment capital had really limited the amount of, or the scale that renewables was being used in the humanitarian sector. So in essence, we wanted to make it really easy for humanitarian organizations to acquire solar by structuring a service similar to what a utility does in a developed country by selling electricity, and supporting organizations throughout the whole process of the procurement, from the first technical assessment of the compound to installation and operations, and offering organizations to pay on a monthly basis. So if you go to the next slide. So to do this, we looked at models that were available in the commercial energy sectors and explored how we could tailor them for the humanitarian space. So in our minds, there were 3 main options that we thought were meaningful to discuss. The first was the traditional purchase option. The second was a leasing option. And the third was a power purchasing agreement, or a PPA. So for the first option, the purchase option, this normally entails that the organizations themselves identify their requirements they have for electricity and make the design for a particular system. They would then tender this system and get bids from companies willing to supply the components and or install the entire system. The organization pays the full amount for the system at the commissioning, and then the overall responsibility falls on the organizations to do the operations and maintenance of the system. So one of the big weaknesses that we saw with this model is that when there are problems with the system, often the organizations struggle to identify what the problem is, if it's with the design of the system itself or with any particular components. We've also seen that a lot of organizations, even though they get a sort of very high-end company to install the initial system, they use local electricians without the necessary qualifications to try to fix problems, and often with makeshift solutions. So the end result is that there are just a lot of solar systems that are not functional within the humanitarian space. And I think we met a lot of skepticism among people working in the humanitarian sector who think that the ability of renewable technology is quite limited. So we've tried to develop other models that sort of would prevent some of these problems. And the second option that we see as an attractive way for humanitarian organizations to go is the leasing model. So the term leasing is applied to procurement where organizations will sign a contract for several years, normally 5 years and above, and when the organizations then get the power from the system that is installed on their compound, and that the ownership of the system is eventually transferred to the organizations. So this is what we call a sort of a lease to own model. It's normal that there's a small mobilization fee, maybe around 10% of the cost of the system, and that the remaining payments are made on a monthly basis. And so you avoid the big upfront payment that the purchase model requires. In essence, this model allows organizations to focus on their energy needs and leave it to companies to establish designs that will meet these requirements. When the organizations discuss options with the company, they can specify the minimum amount of output that the system should produce during the leasing period, and thereby shift some of the financial implications of underperformance of the systems back onto the solar company. The solar companies therefore have the incentive to make designs that will work well and perform according to the specification. If long-time batteries are used, for example, good quality lithium-ion batteries, most of the kinks of the system should be addressed before the end of the lease, and a lot of the risk will then be taken out of the project for the humanitarian organization. In many leasing models in more deep field location, we see that there is sometimes a shared responsibility for operations and maintenance, where, for example, the humanitarian organization takes on the cleaning of the panels, the simple jobs, and then the solar company comes and do a more regular maintenance on the system periodically. The third model that we think is quite interesting is the power purchasing agreement, or PPA. And the principle here is that organizations fully step away from procuring a system itself to procuring electricity. So these contracts often run from around 3 to 10 years. And if the organization wants to use a PPA for their own compound, so they're the only customer, it's normal that there's a predetermined amount of electricity each month that they will pay for. But the model also allows for more comprehensive options. For example, that the entire energy production from an organization is outsourced, including the diesel generators. So it will then be a complete system with solar, batteries, and diesel. Also, this model can be applied to settings where there are many organizations that are in the same location and are connected in one grid. In both the situation with diesel and solar as one sort of outsourced service, and when there are many organizations on one grid, it's possible to move away from sort of having a predetermined amount of electricity, and that organizations pay just per kilowatt hour that they use over a month. And so this is what will be closest to a utility service. So if you go to the next slide. So the main considerations that we think should be included when deciding between these three models is, first of all, the level of technical expertise that the organization has. Do they have access to people that can help define the specifications of the system and can identify weaknesses in design or the components of the proposed systems? If not, we think that the financed models, the lease or the PPA, is an attractive option. The other one is financing. If the organizations have access to donors or other financing mechanisms like loans, that this could make the purchasing available for them. If not, we think that leasing or PPA can be easier for the organizations to acquire. The third is procurement procedures. Many organizations have a limited ability to commit over time to financial payment obligations, and if that's the case, that will make it difficult to enter into a lease or a PPA. And the final thing is operations and maintenance. We see that many organizations underestimate the work related to the operations and maintenance, and if so, we recommend that this is outsourced to other companies to make sure that the system is performing optimally. If we go to the next slide. This slide shows some of the pros and cons of each option, and we have placed them on a double axis. depicting the availability of investment capital, and the other is the time horizon that the organization is considering. A third axis here could have been the organization's willingness to take on technical responsibility. The figure shows that the purchase model can be great for organizations that have a lot of capital available, has a long time horizon up towards 10 years, and a high willingness to take on technical responsibility. The lease is good for organizations that want to limit the technical risk and don't have the upfront investment capital. And the PPA is the cheapest option in the short run and does not require any upfront capital investment. And it's the model that perhaps removes the most amount of technical risk from the organization. If you go to the next slide. This slide shows the financial considerations, and it also shows why sort of time horizon is quite important when deciding between the different models. The blue line and bar shows the costs relating to running an office on diesel generator. This is basically the cost for a medium-sized office in a high-cost environment like, for example, South Sudan. The yellowish bar and the line represents the cost of buying a solar system. This option is by far the most energy intensive the first year. It's definitely what's likely to be the cheapest over a 10-year perspective. The leasing model, represented in green, shows the overall yearly cost for the first 5 years is quite stable. Then it drops quite considerably when the ownership of the asset is transferred to the organization. The PPA in the reddish line has the lowest cost from year one. It does, however, have less significant price drop after 5 years compared to the lease, and will be more expensive than the purchase option in a 10-year perspective. We go to the next slide. So that's a very short introduction to the three main options we think are most relevant for the humanitarian organizations. And as I said in the beginning, the Solar Handbook is available on our webpage and provides much more detail between the main differences and opportunity that each model has to offer. I'll also be happy to answer any questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mats, for showing us about the different implementation models and also giving us the criteria. And now I would like to move to our next presenter for today, Mr. Mohammed Omar Patton. We haven't been able to get Mohammed online because he's today tuning in from South Sudan. So I'm going to move forward with our another presenter and come back to Mohammed once we manage to get him online. So let me quickly skip through the slides. And now I would like to invite our other presenter for today, Nasir Ahmed from ICRC Pakistan. Nasir also has more than 14 years of experience in the sector. And today, Nasir is going to talk about the net metering experience of ICRC Pakistan. Nasir, the floor is yours. I'm going to quickly unmute you. Nasir, please go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody on the webinar. So I will start first small introduction regarding this project. This is basically solar project, the green net metering. So I will explain you later on that what is actually is green net metering. So next slide, please. So in Pakistan, we are already facing a huge electricity shortage, and we are like in Pakistan, the total energy from furnace oil is 14%, natural gas is 31%, coal is 16%, and so on. But renewable energy, solar and wind, is only 5% of the whole portion. So this is very alarming, but in Pakistan, we have a huge capacity for solar energy generation, and solar energy can play a vital role in Pakistan to overcome the energy shortage in the country. And this also play a big role for green environment, for saving the planet. So from the other side, renewable energy sources of energy such as solar, hydro or wind is a cost effective and not harmful of our environment. So that's why we decided to go for this project. So I will explain how this project was carried out, and what is net metering in Pakistan. Next. So ICRC Islamabad, Pakistan office moved last year from rented house to a big commercial building. So taking this opportunity, our management decided to start the solar project on building rooftop. So basically, we did not ask for the extra money. We skipped some interior designing like false ceiling, interior office designing, some furniture and this type of project. So we saved this money and used this money for solar project. So the total cost for this project is around 30,000 US dollars. So this project is started in mid-February last year and completed by end of June. Then inverter and electrical connection was completed in July, and then we received a license for energy generation in August. So this license we received from authority, it's called National Electronics Products of Pakistan. It's like we received in August. So a little bit I tell you about the cost breakdown. So solar panel, it's imported from China. It's like 17,000 US dollar. And then some of the civil work you can see in the picture, frames and other RCC work is like $6,000, and inverter and electrical work is not more than $7,000, and net metering is like 700 US dollar. And during this project, we faced a huge inflation in market, especially dollar fluctuation. So when we started that project, it was the dollar rate in local currency is 120 rupees. Rupee is our Pakistani currency. And after like in mid of August, the dollar rate was 160 or 165. So during this 6 months, we also faced a huge inflation in the market, but finally we managed successfully with this project. Next slide. So let me tell you about the equipment specification. We used Jinko brand. Jinko is world famous brand. It's basically started as a German brand, but we imported this from China, like very near. Is the road distance from Pakistan to China. And the best thing in Pakistan is that there is no duty and there is no tax when you import solar equipment from any other country. So this Jinko brand we use, this is 320 MP, like one panel can produce 320 MP energy. And this is polycrystalline, and the useful life of this solar panel is more than 10 years if you care properly. And the inverter which we used is Crown Arcedo. Crown Arcedo basically is a German brand, but now as Pakistan and even in South Asia, the solar people are moving towards solar. So some local companies also manufacturing this inverter, but we selected Crown, a bit expensive, but it's also imported. So output for Crown is 30 kilowatt, and so we use two inverter because our capacity is energy generation is 48 kilowatt, so we use two inverters. Next slide. So here I will brief you about the the solar energy calculation. So basically in Pakistan, useful sun hour like daylight is average is 4.7. It's sometime during the summer is more than 9 hour, and in mid like March, April is 5 to 6 hour. But here I mention only a average like 4.6 hour. And our energy power is the creating of the power units is 48,000, and let's assume system loss is 20%. So energy production for per day is more than 157,000. So the unit which we produce from this solar system is 158. So total cost is 30,000 US dollar, and the energy which we are generating is 48,000 units from this system. So the running and maintenance cost for the whole year, for the whole 12 month, is not more than $160. And energy production per day is 158 units. Later on, I will explain you what unit is in Pakistan. So then we can say that error rate or from the grid or from the switching cable and all these things, 21 units. So total units per day is 137. We also face some problem during this project, like this is a rented building, and installation of rented building, we have to ask to the owner, we have to approach to the engineer, we have to approach to the local authority for some of the work on the roof. Then there is no technical expertise of supervision of this in ICRC team in Pakistan, because there's nobody is electrical engineer especially in solar system. We faced bad weather here, and construction and installation was delayed. Then there is a lack of technical staff from solar company as well. Sometimes we need to ask about the solar panel question, specific question related to the solar energy generation, but they are unable to reply the question. And then there's a slow process for importing PV panels. It will take like 2 months to import these panels from China. Still is connected with the road, but the process of applying the document and all these things. And then, as I told earlier, that inflation in Pakistan, like USD rate, jump more than 60%. So, but let me explain you about the return on investment. So the price for this project is 30,000 US dollar, and the cost of unit production is in Pakistani rupees is more than 100,000, but we are able to save and return this money is in more than 5 years. We are expecting that in 5 years, I will explain you and further that how that in 5 years return on investment will be like in 5 years. Next slide. So this is very important here, net metering. So net metering in Pakistan is a new concept in 2015. As I told you earlier, we are facing a huge energy crisis. So government of Pakistan decided to reduce the tax to the duties and other things for solar import. So then people, company, organization, individual home, they are moving for solar energy. So for generation of solar energy, you need a license, a proper license from National Electric Power Regulatory Authority. So for ICRC, you can see on my slide, this is the license that we can generate energy. And this is the proper application, then review, technical feasibility and agreement with the NEPRA. And at the end, they will come, they will see your project and they will provide you a license. So we receive a proper license for this generation, energy generation. Next slide. So what actually is net metering? You can see here the picture of a home where the rooftop solar, and then there's an inverter where it's converting your energy into power, and there is a meter in between your home and the national grid. So this meter is basically calculating how much energy you are generating from your solar panel and how much energy or units you are getting from the national grid. So basically this green meter is bi-directional, like the twice on the two side. It's also calculating your energy which you are getting from the national grid, and it's also calculating the energy you are generating from your solar panel. So at the end, when we receive the bill, so it's reduce our electricity consumption, and it's also taking part in that energy calculation which we are giving or importing to national grid. So I will explain you that how we are giving or contributing in the national grid. Next slide, please. This is the actual calculation of our office in Pakistan. So the total required load for our office from 8 to 5 p.m. is 70 kVA kilowatt for the whole office. It's include all the system, all the AC, all the lights, other appliances. It's more than 70 kVA, and total required on the weekend like Saturday, Sunday or other day off or after 5 p.m. is only 5 kVA. So energy which we are generating from the solar panels or solar power system average for the whole season is more than 25 kVA. This 25 kVA is the average. Sometimes is generating more than 40 during the very hot summer days like June and July. But during December or January, when temperature is less than 5, is generating 20 to 25 kVA. So it's mean that when our requirement, like office requirement is 5 kVA, so then the excessive energy generated from the solar power, we are contributing to the national grid through this green metering system. And if we calculate in the units, so the daily, this unit is 1000 kilowatt per hour unit electricity calculation of the units. If daily unit consumption from the national grid is 510 kilowatt per hour, daily units which we are generating from the solar power is 165 kilowatt. So the cost per unit from the national grid is 0.105 US dollar without tax, and tax is not more than 5 or 10%. So all the energy which we are contributing to the national grid, it's calculating through this net metering or green metering system, and it will return to us in our monthly bill, and we are able to save 600 US dollar approximately. So it's mean that we are our total bill in sometime is like $1,500, sometime 2,000, and during a very hot summer day like in June or July it's $3,000. So but we are able to save 600 US dollar per month in our electricity bill, and this is the minimum. Sometime we are maybe we will save $1,000 or $700, but many time we are able to save $600 from our solar system. And some of the good emphasis of this project is this is the first project in humanitarian organization in Pakistan using net metering. This is ICRC is the first organization, and we are able to generate 30 to 40% of our energy of the daily use, as I mentioned on an above slide, of our daily use during the very hot summer days. And we are contributing also 16% of the solar energy generating in the capital city in Islamabad, where our office is. And we are also approached by Energy Board that they want to present our project as a role model to the other organization which they are planning for net metering, because we are the first one. And the very important that is less negative impact on environment, and we are trying to save, we are contributing to save the green planet. Thank you very much, and at the end I will be reply your question.
Thank you, Nasir, for such a comprehensive overview. I think it's really helpful for people who are trying to plan similar projects. So I've been told that we have managed to get our panelist Omar on the line. So I would like to quickly return back to his previous slides so that we can continue with this presentation. And Omar, you have muted yourself. So if you could quickly unmute yourself, then we could continue with your presentation. Omar, if you could quickly unmute yourself. Hello, Omar.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, please go ahead with the presentation.
Yes, I'm hearing. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, and please go ahead with the presentation.
Yes, so today I will be presenting you our hybrid project, which is basically from solar and diesel generators in Humanitarian Hub in Malakal. So this Humanitarian Hub is located in Malakal or Upper Nile State of South Sudan. Humanitarian Hub has around 36 organizations and accommodations for more than 300 individuals. This facility is built on 84,000 square meters, and currently we are running some generators to fulfill our electricity needs, which is 810 kVA, 550 kVA, and we have also 275 and 165 kVA. On daily basis, we consume around 3,125 kilowatt hours of energy. On annual basis, we are consuming more than around 350,000 liters of diesel. So then we tried to move and convert our diesel power grid into the solar or hybrid. For this purpose, due to lack of funding, insecurity, and all other issues, because we are running the humanitarian hub on the cost recovery basis, we went for the power purchase agreement with one of the companies in private sector. So our hybrid power plant includes 704 kilowatt peak of solar arrays or PV modules, and then we have a battery bank of 1,600 kilowatt hours. Our battery bank is a very advanced technology from Tesla, and it will be producing on average 2,500 kilowatt hours a day. The balance of the electricity, which is 625 kilowatt hours, we will be still producing from the generator. Mainly these generators will be running after 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. where we will have again the solar sunshine, and then running back to the, so this is helping us on annual basis to reduce around 744 tons of carbon dioxide from the environment. Also, it will help us not to run the biggest generators in terms of economy, to run and keep to the smallest, because at the load at those hours when we will be running diesel generators will be minimum. So here you can see on this layout where we are putting the solar arrays. We have two directions, which is I have colored that one in red, and we have around 3 PV arrays around our facilities, which will be producing for us the necessary or the required energy. Next slide, please. So why we have selected solar or why we went for this energy or for this solution is because where we are living has no road access. It's a very remote location. The security is not good. And we have a lot of armed conflicts, robberies, and the corruption around our facilities or in the state where we are living. The quality of diesel is extremely low. It's very difficult to store the diesels, not only from the theft or the criminals, but also the storage facilities itself is a very high cost and very difficult to ship. We are shipping everything or supplying everything via air, so it's also difficult for us to have consistency in supply of diesel and spare parts, because sometimes we cannot have flights, cargo flights for us to supply our spare parts. So as it is shipping by air, the costs are also increasing quite rapidly, and also the flight also has effect on the pollution. Our generators, diesel generator also has pollution, and during the day when we are running the generators, even though it has soundproof canopy, but still it can produce noise and in the environment. So what are the basic advantage of our solar grid is that we will have reliability on and security for our power grid. We are reducing big amount of from production of carbon dioxide. We will have noise-free environments, at least during the working hours for our partners. We will be saving around 18% of the cost in terms of electricity production. We will bring stability into our supply system, electricity supply systems. We will also increase lifetime of our existing generators, so we will not need to change our generators quite often. We will also reduce the maintenance cost. We will have less dependency on diesel and also less dependency on the supply chain, and we will not face many problems with the logistical issues, which is one of the major factor in designing or implementing this project. So here is the business model, how we went. So as I told you before, this is power purchase agreement with one of the private sectors. So the capital cost for this project is around $5.4 million, which we do not invest. It will be invested by the private sector company. We will be paying only for the installation and the construction of the facilities for the solar system, which is around, and transportation, of course, which is around 300,000. Maintenance will be done by the supplier. We will be just paying on monthly basis. For the initial 3 years, we will have one rate, and then for third, fourth year up to 10 year, we will be reducing 19% on the monthly fee without losses or reducing in the terms of generation. So after 10 years, if this contract still continue, we will own the ownership of this project, or this equipment will turn into IOM. On annual basis, this is expected to produce 900,000 kilowatt hours. And what is the strong points about this is, as I told before, we are not investing, and this contract is open-ended, so it will be depending on the cost recovery. In case we cannot recover the amount that we are paying to the power supplying company, we may terminate contract anytime. So as I tell you, the first initial 3 years, we are reducing around 21% of the cost in terms of energy generation. From year 3 to year 10, we will save 33% of electricity generation cost. And from year 10 onward, we will be saving around 85%, which is quite massive. This is the so now we will go to another slide, which is the cost analysis. I cannot put the exact cost of the monthly fee and so on, because we have contractual obligations with our supplier that we will not dispose the monthly fee and so on. Here you can see currently we are spending around $70,000 in a month to produce electricity or to fulfill our electrical needs. And then when we have this hybrid project for the initial 3 years, we will be spending around $56,000, which is showing us that we are saving 18% in terms of generation. As I told you, after 3 years, we will be saving more, 33%, and this cost will reduce from $56,000 to $54,000 or $53,000, and after year 10 it will be quite massive saving, and then we may spend $10,000 or around those for generating the same amount of electricity. Another good point with this model is that in case we would like to relocate or move this project to another location, either in South Sudan or outside South Sudan, we will be liable just to pay the transportation and installation costs. So this is how it is managed. Now we will go to this model. So this will be a remote monitoring system using SCADA software, and it will be the maintenance will be done on quarter basis from the supplier, but day-to-day maintenance like cleaning, washing the solar panels, checking into the cleaning around, cutting the grass and so on will be done by IOM staff at the site. Thank you very much. I will be waiting for your question at the end of this session.
Thank you, Omar, for such a comprehensive presentation. And as I mentioned before, I think it's really useful for people who are thinking of planning similar kind of projects. And as I mentioned before, again, if you have any questions, please use the chat box on the right side of your screen and send us your questions, and we will pass them to Omar towards the end during the Q&A session. So let's move forward. I'll quickly skip to Nasir's part. And now I would like to welcome another presenter for today, Gerald Dumore from UNDP. Gerald has more than 30 years of experience in ICT and green energy with technical and humanitarian organizations. And today he's going to talk about UNDP's procedure for UNDP's contracting method. Gerald, the floor is yours. I'm going to quickly unmute you.
Yes, good day, everybody. I assume you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we do.
All right. So, yes, my presentation will be focusing on how to implement renewable energy solution with the focus on developing local capacity. So if we go to the next slides, just to put a little bit of context, why are we having this webinar and these discussions today? By your question, how much green energy gas are we producing? If we go to the next slide, it's a lot. It's over 50 million tons, and 2/3 of it comes from energy and transport. Hence, this webinar that is discussing a lot about various ways of generating energy. If we go to the next slide, perhaps another important element on it, on why it is so important to develop local capacity, is that if we are not having everybody contributing towards reducing our green gas emissions, it won't be enough. No one must be left behind. Everybody must be contributing, including the humanitarian sector and the least developed countries. So if we go to the next slide, for those who don't know UNDP and why we are involved in it, perhaps a quick overview of who we are. The main point to take from this slide is that we have presence in 170 countries, and that is very important if we want to make sure again that everybody is contributing and that no one is left behind. As I said, it is not enough to have just the developed world, Denmark, Germany, US, China, and so on, to putting efforts into reducing our green gas emissions. If we go to the next slide, this is quickly more information about UNDP. And again, you see that our focus nowadays is on climate change, sustainable development, and democratic governments and peacekeeping. To enable these three main focus, a sustainable and reliable source of energy is key to achieve these objectives. Going to the next slide. And yes, to summarize that we want to leave no one behind, and going to the next slides again. What do we do in UNDP to achieve this thing? So if we go to the next slides, we approach implementing smart renewable energy through an overall concept with a vision of creating smart facilities to build local capacity and to inspire a movement. Again, one installation of solar panel is not enough. It has to trigger a movement so that one installation inspired 10 other people to do the same. And these 10 people inspire another 10 people to do the same. And then we have an exponential growth of renewable energy solution in that country office. To do that, we need to have an ecosystem, to build a local system with business locally involved in supporting this global movement. If we go to the next slides, it's a mix of challenges and why are we not able to scale up renewable energy solution as easy as we would like. Just to summarize that very quickly, the first impediment, the first barrier to do that is the lack of local capacity. These green energy solutions can be quite complex. Therefore, it's very important to have technical expertise and the know-how on how to do it. The second barrier is the lack of investment instrument. So although the business case may be very favorable, if there is no investment in modalities, and we are depending on just upfront investment, that's something that prevent many organizations in the humanitarian sector to go ahead with these solutions. If we go to the next slide, that gives you an overview of in implementing renewable energy solution. It's important to put it into a whole that we call smart facilities, which is a fusion of what is known as smart cities and the fourth industrial revolutions with Internet of Things, electric vehicles, digital, artificial intelligence, and so on. So the important is that everything in your facilities is interconnected and well integrated with your solar panels. So we can do things like the previous presentation from Pakistan, net metering, for example. Or we can use electric vehicle as energy storage solutions. So as we say, the whole is greater than the sum of its part. So 1 + 1 = 3. As an example, we use electric vehicle not only to take you from point A to point B, but also as a means to take excess energy, should there be excess energy from the solar panels, or store energy when you have a power outage or something like that. So we like to have a model where solar panels are just not installed as a standalone, but in an integrated fashion with all the elements that you see on that slide. If we go to the next slides, and this is where we want to focus our presentations, this is how we have modelized our procedures and model to implement green energy solutions. So we have 7 steps, and behind each of these 7 steps, there are tools, templates, contracts, and so on, so that this is a turnkey solutions. It is also a recognized best practice within the UN system. When I say best practice, this is not because this is the best that there is out there, but the best practice is a term that refers to every time we do an installation, we go back to each of these procedures and we do continuous improvement. So when we do an installation, we have leveraged all the lessons learned, and we have the latest technology, the latest way of doing things, and so on. If we go with the first step, so it's very important to involve from the beginning the beneficiary, the owner of the system. So let's take an example in South Sudan. From the beginning, we involve the police academy into these 7 steps. So we let them do the self-assessment by installing Internet of Things to measure all the various information that we need, the load, power consumption, the generators, runtime, so on and so forth. And we do that using, as I said, the 4th industrial revolution technology, Internet of Things with sensor and all of that. And with algorithm, we're producing a business case, the second step. Again, always in collaboration with the actual user of the system. And that will put on board all their decision-making people and their technical people on the various options that they should be implementing. When they've picked their options, then we go to the step number 3, which is procurement. We have more than a dozen long-term agreements with various global vendors, international vendors, that have experience in implementing these systems where we work. And we also start the site preparation with the facilities where we're going to install it. It's very important to understand again that we try to have the best combination of international providers, and we ask them to partner with a local partner to do a knowledge transfer and training and guide them throughout the process. So this is mandatory when we do our request for proposal. Then we select the vendors, and then we do the site survey, the design, and the installation. The site survey, the design, and installation has to be done mainly by the local partner under the guidance of the global vendor with whom we have the long-term agreement. And then we go into the last step, and it's been mentioned before by other presenters, the operation and maintenance. This comes with a 3-year operation and maintenance, where we monitor the installation 24/7, and we do optimization on a biannual basis. We produce performance report to see how the system is performing and see how we can improve it, and so on. So in a nutshell, we're trying to leverage the expertise of global vendors to guide the local partners and build an ecosystem locally that is sustainable. Because after we have done with this installation, we have a few businesses locally that have now the expertise and the business appetite to go out and install more of the system. So that's a little bit the idea behind the 7-step procedures. If we go to the next slide, perhaps very quickly to say why this is important to follow these 7-step. And one of the reasons is that it offers a structured and well-defined terminology that is proven and that is that has the best practice on how to install solar panels. So it really helps in places where there's no experience or no capacity yet. All you have to do is follow these steps, use these tools and resources in order to have a successful implementation. We can go to the next slides.
Gerald, we are over time.
Yeah, okay, so I will just conclude perhaps with a few success stories. So in Liberia, this is one of the places where we have installed one installation, and then it has produced an ecosystem where we now have multiple installations going on there in 13 other country offices. If we go to the next slides, we also have South Sudan there. And to conclude, this is a little bit of a footprint, the next slide, of how many solar panel installations we have. So I'll just conclude by saying that the key message is one project will make a difference if we are to tackle climate change. And to have everybody to contribute, we have to focus on building local capacity and to trigger a movement. The best practice that provide in a showcase is the best way to trigger a movement locally, and we're have had these success stories in a few places. Also, perhaps to conclude, part of these 7-step, we have training packages that we offer. So we're happy to share the kind of training we can offer. One is the 7-step best practice implementation for renewable energy. We also have training on smart facilities, energy efficiency, and energy audit. So on this note, I'll just conclude here and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald, for sharing with us the 7 steps. And now I would like to move forward to welcome our next speaker and the last speaker for today, Paul Quigley from UNITA. And Paul is going to quickly summarize the lessons from Finance Workshop Series. Paul, the floor is yours. So you are now unmuted.
Great, thanks. Thank you. So, hi everyone. Just the picture that's up there at the moment is kind of what we're all very familiar with, what we're trying to get away from, this kind of reliance on diesel, which we all see the problems with this. Could you, next slide, please. We're trying to get closer to a little bit more of this, and like the projects which were demonstrated earlier on, why though, however, have we not got there? Why has this movement towards renewable energy and energy efficiency not really taken off in the same way we think it should have? So we had some ideas and assumptions on this, but we wanted to hold a series of workshops, both with the agencies who are going in that direction, and also those energy providers or private sector people who could assist to go in that direction, to find out what the key barriers are and how we might overcome those. So next slide, please. We held a series of 2 workshops in July, and the first workshop was for humanitarian agencies working in forcibly displaced settings, primarily the UN agencies and ICRC. And with those, we wanted to explore what their issues were. So in general, there's still a huge reliance on diesel. You know, there's graveyards of failed solar projects. One statistic is that 85% of solar installations put in sub-Saharan Africa fail within 12 months. So there is a kind of a reluctance to go there, both because they have a lack of in-house expertise, and also the upfront costs are quite high. And another key issue is they are reluctant to sign long-term agreements in these situations which are remote and somewhat uncertain or unstable. And in addition to that, the procurement focus tends to be on upfront costs or not life cycle analysis. And so that was the first workshop. And in the second, then we addressed with the private sector. And again, it's a high-risk context, and there's very low energy use when you look at it on a household level. And the organizations themselves aren't really willing to engage in these long-term agreements, but yet they don't have the upfront financing to move those. So these were kind of some of the key things blocking where we were going and where we're trying to get to. And there's a lack of data, and also there's no clear pathway or process within the humanitarian agency. So a private sector company doesn't know how to enter into this system, and there is no clear guideline within those systems about how to address these different things. So next slide, please. We were looking then as well at what levels you could do these different business models that were explained by Mads earlier on. And if you're looking at a power purchase agreement, there are quite a lot of upfront costs with relation to doing those. So you're looking with those in general, you're looking at a fairly larger scale system, probably more than $1 megawatt or $1 million before people are going to get interested in that power purchase agreement. And even possibly with leasing, you might be looking at something larger, particularly for the larger companies. And next slide, please. But if you're looking at something much smaller like this, then you're probably not going to get too many people interested in leasing at all, and certainly not with power purchase agreements. You'd be looking at upfront costs for this. Something less than 50 kilowatts, let's say, you may have to go down that route. It depends on the size of the organization, but that's in general what we had found. And outside of that, though, if you have a lot of small systems together, then it might be more attractive for a private sector operator. So if you have 20 humanitarian organizations working in one location, if you shared your power source and if you came together to collaborate, it would enhance the opportunity then for the private sector and make it cheaper for everybody and easier to operate. So, I mean, ideally, we'd all like a situation where we just pay an electricity bill and we don't have to worry about all this technical expertise and maintenance and everything else. And the idea is that the private sector have that expertise and can take that headache away from humanitarian organizations whose main focus isn't this technical area. And next slide, please. And then just looking at the key recommendations from the workshop. I mean, the top 2 from both workshops is we need to try and create these long-term agreements for humanitarian agents to be able to enter into contracts with energy providers to get this renewable energy. And the guarantee mechanism that's mentioned below is these locations are very uncertain, unstable. Humanitarian organizations don't know whether the situation will continue for 1 year or for 20 years. It's not clear, and they're very reluctant to go into these long-term agreements. Even if they did go into one, there's no guarantee that the situation they may not need this power in 2-3 years time, and they don't want to be stuck with this contract for power that they no longer need. So it was highlighted from both sides that these guarantee mechanisms would make it easier to enter into these contracts and to set up systems to mitigate the risk for all of that. And then some of the other ones were just developing training programs for looking at longer term evaluations and developing these clear pathways and strategies, a bit like what UNDP just mentioned, Gerald, on the 7-step model and things like that. How do you come from a place with diesel generators to getting a successful and sustainable energy system in place, and what are those pathways and strategies? And without relevant data and metering to demonstrate benefits, how do you do that? So again, most places don't accurately record their diesel consumption or the amount of energy that they use. And then, yeah, so next slide, please. I'm just moving through this fairly quickly. So before you go to get your lovely shiny new solar PV system, you really need to address your energy efficiency before you go down that road. You try to make your system as small as possible, so it's cheaper to purchase and to maintain. And one of the first things you will need to do is to put in this metering to monitor your energy use. How much energy are you now using, and how much diesel are you spending? And once you know that, then you have a baseline on which you can monitor your change. And the second thing is to put in more energy efficiency appliances everywhere. So if you have lots of old air conditioners and old style of lights and appliances, you're going to be costing yourself an awful lot more money than you are in the long term. And if you change these air conditioners for dual inverters, as opposed to, you could save 50% of that cost. And in conjunction with behavioral change programs, where you encourage people to turn these off at weekends or at nighttime, or you put in timers which automatically switch these appliances off, you could reduce your energy consumption, your actual energy need, by 20 to 50%. And so that will have a huge impact then when you go to design your solar PV system. In other considerations would be clustering buildings, organizations coming together to share electricity supplies, and looking at shared facilities in general, and site planning as well, orientation towards the sun, putting in more insulation, considering shading and other things too. But the point here is that if you use less energy, you will then use less power, and you're going to reduce your costs overall. So that's the first thing to consider. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think that was a nice overview as well as summary of all the different points that we discussed in different presentations. And thank you to all the other speakers too. And now we are moving into the Q&A sessions, and we have a lot of amazing questions coming in. If you have not sent in your questions, again, please use the question box on the right side of your screen and send in your questions. So I want to start with Matt. The first question is for you, and the question is, considering that humanitarian projects are normally 2 to 3 years, they have a lifeline of SOAs, 2 to 3 years, do PPA, power purchase agreement, or leasing models, are these applicable in humanitarian settings according to your experience?
Yes, I think it is, but I think as Paul mentioned in his presentation, I think it will not be an option that is available for every type of site. Our experience from working on this now for a few years is that the areas where there is quite a high demand for electricity, so that there's a certain scale to the system, and areas where the cost of diesel is perhaps particularly high, so that the business case for solar is good. Companies will be interested also in looking at shorter term contracts, but it's definitely a constraint, and I think for us, anything sort of below 5 years is always sort of systems that have to be very carefully sort of structured to be able to fit those constraints, but it is possible.
Thank you so much. Do anybody else want to add something to that point? Omar, maybe you, because you also have an experience with the renting model. Omar, you'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, I cannot get him to unmute himself, so let's proceed maybe. And if we get him back, then we can ask him again. So the next question is for Gerald. So to Gerard, the question is, do you also have long-term agreement templates for all the 3 models mentioned earlier, like purchase, leasing, and PPA models for UNDP? Gerard, you're not unmuted.
Okay. No, unfortunately, we have long-term agreement just for the model number 1, the upfront payment. But we are working on getting long-term agreement for the other 2 models.
Thank you. And I think we also have one follow-up question is, do you have any project in Afghanistan?
Afghanistan, yes, we do. We have 1 completed. No, we have 2 completed and 1 in progress. And it's been very, very successful in Afghanistan because of the security reason. Solar panels brings a lot of resilience to diesel generators and so on.
Thank you so much. And I guess our audience can have a look at that in the UNDP website, right? They can find more information there about it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And now I would like to move to you, Paul. So the question to Paul is, what is UNITAR planning to do following the results from the workshop? And can we discuss any future programs to demo the best options?
Yeah, well, as I said, the key things that came out of these workshops were looking at long-term agreements and these guarantee mechanisms. And so we've been working on creating those so far. So we're coming close to having the long-term agreements in place, which were worked out with the assistance of GIZ and some specialist legal consultants, and so that the humanitarian agencies and private sector are happy with that. And then we've been discussing or exploring the financial guarantee mechanisms with financial institutions, and we should be coming close to that in the first quarter of this year, so we can keep everybody updated on that.
Super, thank you so much. And now I'd like to go back to Omar. So Omar, the question for you is, so for the program that you mentioned, did you do environmental assessment, and what are the benefits that occur to population who are around the site and actually not part of the IOM project? Omar, you'll have to unmute yourself. Omar, are you there? I think we lost, Omar, are you there? Omar? I think we kind of lost him, so maybe I proceed and go back to the other questions. So maybe I can come back to Nasir. So the question to Nasir is, let me first unmute you. So for Nasir, the question is, you talked about that the houses where the solar panel has been installed, so those are rented houses. So what happens in the long term when ICRC decide to move to a new location? What kind of contract do you have with the house owner? If you can say a little bit about it.
Well, the problem for the rented building is their structure. When there's a rented building, if you ask the owner that we are going to install more than 150 panel on your roof, and then they have a lot of question, the load and bearing, civil structure and other type of things. So that's why it's difficult when it was not planned at the initial stage or design. And if we are moving from there, so we will lose the civil structure, but we are able to move all the solar panel to new location. So the only thing if we are lost is the only civil structure. And the agreement with the owner is that we will move our solar panel from the roof if we will move from this building.
Okay, that makes sense. And one follow-up question is, you talk about net metering. So do you also have the price for which you sell the electricity back to the grid? So if you could share that price, if you have it on hand.
Yes, we will receive our first bill because we are still in the pilot phase. We will receive first bill in February, mid-February, and we are expecting, as I mentioned, that we are able to save $600 in our electricity bill.
Thank you so much for that then. And now moving further, there is actually a question for everyone. So please feel free to jump in. So the question is there a demand for an energy company that would take over the entire energy management / security of supply for a cluster of NGOs? So please feel free to jump in.
Well, in Pakistan, as I mentioned in my presentation, that the Solar Energy Development Board approached us that they want to show our project to the different organization as a role model. That's how you can generate energy from your rooftop and for your own, and even you can contribute to the national grid. So in with this context, one private company approached us, which is a solar company, and they want, because ICRC is not a business organization, that's why we not heard them and we not considered them, but they somehow they showed the interest in that case if they able to run this system or something like this. But as ICRC is not a business organization, so we not considered them, and the chapter was closed at the same time there.
Okay. And Matt, as a business organization, do you see a lot of potential and demand for an energy company in this field?
Well, I think definitely that there is a lot of potential for companies to come in and supply the power to clusters of organizations operating in a confined location. I think what the organizations should probably consider is how they want to manage that project.
Okay.
One option is that a company comes in and they provide a proposal to the organizations and provide a price. I think perhaps the optimal solution for the organizations and the way that they will get the cheapest energy is if they hire a third party to come in and define the parameters of the project and then tender out that project so that different private companies will bid for the project. That way they are less sort of in a less vulnerable place where the company itself sets the price, but rather have different companies competing and pushing that price down. So I definitely think that this is a model that quite a few organizations should explore if they are operating in a sort of a similar location or close to each other. And I think that there's many good ways of benefiting from those type of projects.
Thank you. I think there is a question that actually coincides with the same point that you mentioned. The question is, so as we know, the vast majority of sites that we have for humanitarian sites are too small for PPA and leasing companies. So from your experience, how do you see humanitarian or agencies addressing it? Would you say it's the cluster like Paul talked about, or?
Yeah, I think that I see that NRC is now doing have asked for bids for a series of offices in South Sudan. So what they have done is define needs for 6 locations throughout the country, and invited companies to bid through a PPA. And I think this can, I mean, there's in the middle of that process, so it will be interesting to see what comes out of it. But I think this can be a good way of getting interest for smaller locations. And I think the other option is for organizations to go together and ask for companies to bid for establishing grids that supply several offices in one specific location.
Thank you. And now the second question, I think it's more for Gerald and Nasir. Maybe you can tip in for here. So the question is, do you have any kind of evaluation showing how well private contractors under long-term service agreements are doing? So Gerald, do you want to go first on that?
Yes, absolutely, we do. We do in using 2 different ways. The first one is purely based on a biannual data analysis that produces a report to see how the system is performing. And on an annual basis, we have an annual review with the vendor on their performance in how they have managed with the logistic, the installation, the training of the recipients, and building local capacity with their local partners and so on. So the performance is evaluated along these lines, and that's pretty well how we do it.
Thank you. And would this evaluation reports be available somewhere so that some other people can access and read through it?
Well, the technical performance report that are done on a biannual basis, yes. Of course, the vendor annual performance report is something that is sensitive. It's between UNDP and the vendor itself. But the purpose of that is, of course, to build better partnership between UNDP and the vendors, and to continuously improve on how we deliver to our customers.
Super. Thank you so much. Nasir, would you like to add something to that point?
Yes. In Pakistan, we will connect this system in next month when we receive our first bill through Wi-Fi system, and this basically there will be application and website which will provide us the data, daily generation of energy in units, in form of units, that how much kilowatt we generated from during this day, the full sunny day, and how much we used or how much we are contributing towards national grid. So what we are assuming that we will use this data for our return of an ROI calculation, that how much we are able to save the money, and how much we are returning. And another important factor for that thing is that we will also be able to calculate that how much we are contributing for the full month to the national grid, and this will be a free of cost. The energy will be free of cost, but we will receive this reimbursement from the national grid.
Superb. I think if you can ever make those data public, it would be great, because I think it would be really interesting for a lot of people to see. But
yes,
now
as I mentioned in my presentation, that this is a lengthy process. It's taking time, but hopefully next month we will be able to share something with you.
Superb. That's great. I know we have a lot of questions coming for Omar, so I'll try one last time to get Omar on the line. And if we don't manage to get him online, we will forward your questions to him so that he can answer them, and we'll try to document them on Energypedia so that you can have a look at it afterwards. So let me just try one more time to get Omar. Hi, Omar. Hi, Omar, are you there? Omar, could you say something, please? I think he's struggling with his internet and we have not been able to connect with him. So as I mentioned before, we will just forward all your valuable questions to him and request him if he could answer them. So moving forward to other questions. And that's a question for everyone again. So would NGOs be interested in as a service / full OPEX model, as opposed to NGOs coming up with some of the CapEx? Do anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I'll just say something on that. I think they'd be interested in both, or even a combination of both. I mean, a lot of organizations don't have this upfront capital, so the OPEX only model would be great. It just depends on whether you present it so that you can see your costs over 10 years time, how much you'd save, how much each particular option costs you, and to present that to them. I don't think there's a hard rule to say you have to go down one route or another, but I think organizations would be definitely interested in that, or a combination of both.
Thank you, Paul, for that quick answers. And now I want to move to Gerald. There is one question for you. And the question is, at the end of your presentation, you talked about this training package on energy audit and energy efficiency. And the question is if you could tell us a bit more about them.
Yes, so it's an on-site training course with engineers that goes through the 7-step, present all the tools and so on, and also provides a energy efficiency analysis of your facility. Install Internet of Things, all these sensors to measure your power consumption from the main lines, the generators, but also individual circuits, so you understand where the energy is going to your air conditioning, your data center, and so on. There are various modules on energy efficiency, energy audit, and the best practice for the 7 steps. So if you do all the module, it's about 5 days, and we would be happy to provide you with a syllabus of these courses. This is something now that we're working with UNITAR to make these training courses recognized by universities, so people can get postgrad credits for them, and they are available to any NGOs, UN agencies, and even governments and partners around the world.
Thank you so much, Gerard, for that. And now I would like to maybe take the last question for today, and that's for Paul. So the question is a bit lengthy, sorry about that. So it says, has there been any analysis of a more holistic approach, clustering offices and high energy consumers together around pico-grid approaches that we discussed today, or distributed small-scale solar home systems using pay-as-you-go and personal portable lights and charts for those with lower consumption? So the question is about the two approaches, pico-grid approaches or the solar home system, the small-scale solar home systems. And the question is, it seems it's either one or other. And from your experience, do you see any examples where it has been a combination of both?
I haven't seen any kind of comprehensive reports or studies on trying to do this more holistic approach. It is indeed where people are trying to move, because one solution doesn't fit everybody, and even if there's a mini grid locally, you may not want to connect to that. You may only need some solar torches or a smaller system, so it would be better to have those. But unfortunately we don't have yet the data on that type of products. I mean, there's some data out on specific swarm grids or specifically small pico systems, but nothing yet that incorporates the whole lot, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that. Gerald and Nasir, do you want to add something to that from your own experiences from different projects? Sorry, I'll quickly unmute both
for
of
me,
you.
You're cutting off
Yes,
again.
Nasir.
For me in Pakistan, this is one of the first project for humanitarian organization when we are connected through net metering. That one humanitarian organization is generating solar energy from the rooftop and contributing to the net through the net metering system to the national grid. There are many other organizations which are generating energy through solar system, but they did not went for net metering. So ICRC is took the first step, and I hope that many organizations will follow the step and connect through the net metering system. That's it from my side.
Gerald, do you want to add something?
Sorry, you were cutting off, so I missed the question.
Oh, the question was, when we look at projects, we either see projects focusing on small-scale solar home systems or SHS, or we have projects that are focusing on pico-grid approaches. So have you come across any project which looks at combining both of them and offering a holistic approach?
Well, perhaps Steve can help me because you were cutting off again, but if I understood correctly, if we have any experience with small project, and the answer is yes. Whatever the size of the project, we still have a lot of interest from the private sector and vendors to do that. Sometimes it's even better to get a first small project installed, from which we learn, and that will inspire other people in the area that sees that project to follow suit. So for us, it's not been a problem to get interest in small projects. And by small project, perhaps 10 kilowatt peak and then more. Perhaps so you can jump in if you wish.
Yes, I think that's right, Gerald. You summarized it properly, because in all that we do, we always keep the concept of our vision, those 2 points in our vision in mind, to make sure we are able, in whatever we do, we can build local capacity, use these international players to help the local companies build local capacity, and also be able to build what is a showcase that can actually trigger a movement. So we try to spread this and be as transparent as we can. That's how the UN operates. So we keep those principles in mind in all the approaches.
Well, thank you so much, Satishu, and that was the end of the Q&A session. And now, before we close the webinar for today, a huge thank you to all our speakers for your amazing presentation, to all our listeners for staying with us till the end. And do stay tuned for our upcoming webinar in February, where we will talk about energy efficiency and designing for sustainability, especially for humanitarian projects. And when you close the webinar, our survey will pop up. Please do fill out the survey, because as we are developing the webinar, we are using the survey as a basis to come up with new ideas and new topics. So we are taking into account all of your suggestions that you give us in the survey. And as I mentioned before, all the presentations as well as the webinar recording will be available online, and they will be sent in an email. The link will be sent in a follow-up email. And then I thank you so much. I thank you once again, and have a good day.